When I say beginning your brand, what I'm talking about there is you building out your brand. And before I actually chat about a couple of things you can do to build out your brand, I'd like to mention a guy named Jay Abraham. Now, Jay is an incredible individual. He was listed as, doing $22 billion, highest paid marketing consultant, by Forbes Success Inc. And he's incredible. I got a chance to spend time with him. I spent 15 grand to spend 3 days with him at a workshop, learned 9 pillars of business success, which actually was one of the foundations of me building my business that went from 0 to 108 million because I met him in my second year where I did 12 million, and he certainly helped me build out the 108 million that was there. I had him at conferences. I interviewed him. We did podcasts together. At one point, he asked me to actually sell for him, meaning that I would interview him. And then because he's not the best salesperson when it comes to one-on-one selling, incredible guy in terms of marketing, he would say, can you actually script the words for me and say them for me? And he would make a statement and I would close in terms of how that would do. And I did a number of interviews with him. He's a really incredible guy. But let me share with you a couple of strategies from Jay, right, that lead into kind of a branding conversation. The first is USP. Now, USP stands for unique selling proposition. What it means is that you need to be distinctly different from other people. There has to be one thing that sets you apart from everybody else. Now, the one thing that set me apart when I did my learning how to trade product, besides the fact I am a trader and it works, was that I gave a no questions 100% money back guarantee. If it didn't work for you, you got your money back. In 1 year, if you spent 15 grand with me, 20 grand with me to learn how to trade, and I came out to your house for 3 days and taught you how to trade, if it didn't work, I paid it back. Now, I did 82 of those at 15 to 20 grand, never gave a penny back. And it's not because I'm frugal. It's because the thing works. And I knew it works because it wins 9 times out of 10, does on average anywhere from 8 to 10%. 7 to 10%, so it's a great strategy. So what sets you apart? What's unique? Is it your guarantee? Is it something that you do 24-hour service? Amazon, their big USB is either immediate delivery or next day delivery. And they've made that their message. Domino's, used to do, 30 minutes are free, right? It sets you apart and distinct from everybody else. So, what's your unique selling proposition? Because that's the thing you want to build on as a message within your marketing, within your selling. And the second thing that Jay taught me was preeminence. And preeminence is being the market leader. It really does pay off to become the honey, right, in terms of being the market leader. So we want to become the market leader, so that people come to us rather than having to go to them, right? Next thing that Jay taught me was partnerships. Now, this is probably one of the most important elements that I learned, and it's part of branding, and people don't realize it. Partnerships, and he would say, rather than you going and trying to find customers, ads, marketing, sales, what he would say is go find somebody that already has your customer and build a relationship with them. If you build a relationship with them and they endorse you, or you do a joint venture with them, then you can take your products and services to them or vice versa. Now, when COVID hit, this is exactly what I did. I had all these great products and services that I was out speaking regularly, teaching and presenting. And, I had all these great products and services, but I hadn't been in the marketplace to build database, although I did have an old database. So what I did is I went to two of my friends who were speakers that I had trained and worked with in the past and said, hey, let me tap your database. And whatever we sell, we split 50-50. Srini was the first guy, radio show, did 30K first time, 48,000 the next time, split it 50-50, so not a bad day at the office. Bill Bronchek was the second person we did it, and every 6 to 8 weeks, I would tap his database. He would do all the marketing. We get anywhere from 50 to 80 people online, and then we would sell a product or services. So it is worth your while to sit down for an hour or two and make a list of everybody that has your database, right? If you're a business to business and you're trying to sell business products and services, the natural place for you to go is the Chamber of Commerce. There's 3,200 of them in the UK, right? So who has your database? What kind of partnership? What kind of access can you get? And then that could be YouTube. I'll come back to that in just a few minutes. One of the elements that Jay as a pillar you would say you have to create marketing leverage, and that is basically if you build an asset like a reel, like an ad, a 60 second, and you're doing it for Facebook, where else can you take that asset and use it? It might be on YouTube, it might be someplace else, but where else can you use the same assets to leverage your existing market? And he would always talk about the lifetime value. Doesn't matter what the immediate sale is. What matters is the lifetime. And I actually thought about this the other day when I thought about Starbucks. Been going to Starbucks pretty much every day of my life, right? And let's say there's 365 days, which there are. Maybe I get 250 of those, at $4. That's $1,000 pounds every year. And I've been going to Starbucks for 40 years. I'm the lifetime value of me as a customer for Starbucks is 40 grand. Right. So would they spend a couple of $100 on me? For sure. Right. So we have to understand not only the return like ROAS, right? Return on ad spend, but we have to understand the details of what's the cost to get a customer, right? And I know the cost for me to get a customer was about $600, but I also knew that immediately within the first 3 years, I would get 4,000 back of that. So we want to think about the lifetime value, the repetitive kind of pieces with respect to it. And I'm going to come back to this when I talk about increasing revenue, some of the things I learned from Jay. A/B testing, you always want to be A/B testing, right? If you're doing Facebook right now, you want to be testing YouTube, right? And the way that I used to do this in the Fortune 500 company, was literally I would do 90% of a campaign's budget on what I knew was working and continue to work. And I would always take 10% of the budget and test new things, right? A new offer, a new headline, think of that nature. So if you got an ad that's working, don't give up. Continue to test it and A/B test it, whether it's the headline or whether it's the image or whether it's the offer, whatever it might be. But keep the one that's working, and spend 90% of your money on the one that's working and 10% always upselling, and that's Kaizen. 1% shift and improvement over the course of time gives you a new destination. Innovation. Add things, improve things, always be upgrading. There's also a message there in terms of marketing. I know, for example, that about every year, year and a half, my marketing would start to take a dive. Cost per lead would go up, cost per conversion would go up, and it was always about the message. And that's why one of the reasons, to continue to test new things, because at some point your marketing gets stale and it can take a dramatic dump all of a sudden, and then you're in a tough spot. So we always want to have that second, third kind of campaign, innovation, change, improvement of the message moving along, right? Always educate your market. Educate your market in terms of products, services, what else they can do with you. Hopefully, we're educating them in terms of additional products and services. And of course, Jay was a big proponent, and he would say that, literally 50% or more of your market, your sales, comes from nurturing and retargeting and database. Right. And Jay was pretty good about that. He talked about the four revenue streams, for building a business. And one of the revenue streams was always you want to increase the number of customers. Well, most people, when they think about increasing the number of customers, go, well, I've got an ad in a funnel, it's working. I'm going to go do something else. And what they need to do is to improve the sales performance first, right? So what I mean by that is, if you're closing 10% of the inquiries that you're getting, the easiest way for you to increase your revenue, the easiest way for you to get more customers is to increase your close ratio. You need to become a master closer. You need to be able, to literally list in the moment, any moment, five closing techniques, because 80% of all sales happen on the fifth close. And if you don't know that, that's the first area to get more customers you need to work on. Because if you are bringing in 10 leads and you're closing one, that's 10%. We close two, we get 20%, we're going to make more money, right? So we work on the sales process first. Then we work on the new vehicle. So if you're doing a lead magnet right now, and I'm teaching you a LinkedIn, let's do the lead magnet, increase the sales performance there first in terms of closing, conversions, before we do the LinkedIn strategy, right? So we want to make sure, because the second thing is always a new strategy. The other piece to doing that in terms of revenue is increasing the transactional value. That means having an upsell, an upgrade, an additional product or service. And if you have an additional product or service right now, add another one, right? There is that popcorn method, of pricing where you do three price points, even four sometimes, but if you don't know what the popcorn method of pricing is, look online on YouTube and look for the popcorn method of pricing, and pop it up and you'll see an example of it. But literally, you want to increase the transactional value by having more products and services for sale. So if you have one and you have one upsell, man, that's not enough. You need to have one and an upsell and another upsell. And generally, when I talk about the pricing model, and I learned this first of all, decades ago, literally in a magazine, and I talked about pricing model. Basically, 10% of customers want something else. Now that's the minimum. Typically, it's 10 to 30%, but 10% being the minimum. So if I'm selling $1,000 product and 100 people buy it, I know there's 10 people that literally want a 3K package. And of the 10 people that take the 3K package, I know there's one that wants a 10K package. All right. So that transactional increase in transactional value and the lifetime value over time is an incredible thing that you want to build over time. Increase the frequency. This is that post marketing. Once you have a database, you want to post market, whether it's quarterly or it's monthly. Some people even do it weekly with weekly specials where they condition the people to expect every Friday they're going to get a weekly sale. And of course, the last one is increasing your prices. It is said, and Gartner said this, which is a publication that does small business studies, said that 15 to 30% of all small businesses undercharge, right? Which means you could probably bump your prices. In fact, I often say this in fact, I said it this weekend at Adam's house. There was a lady there that literally was getting her people into conversations, discovery calls, and she was closing 8 out of 10 of the people in terms of her discovery call, and it was a low price point, right? So my immediate response was bump your price. If you're closing 8 out of 10, your price is too cheap, and or you do not have other products and services, right? So literally, if you get really good at a specific skill set, it's time to bump the prices, right? Because you can actually make more money with less people, right? So increasing your prices is always piece. All right, so we learn a little bit from Jay, about preeminence and USP and stuff like that. Let's go back to branding, right? So when it comes to branding, kind of thinking about these concepts and systems and processes, first of all, I believe you got to be loud and proud, right? That was not always the case for me. I used to be the kind of person that, thought you should be fairly shy, never be too gregarious, never be out there. And in fact, if I was in a networking event, I'd be the guy by the coffee, drinking coffee, waiting for somebody to talk to me, right? But I realized that didn't serve me well when it comes to sales, comes to marketing, comes to speaking, comes to branding. So you want to be loud and proud. You want to make sure you get your message out there. You do not want to be the best kept secret. You want to make sure your products and services are getting out to people. One of the ways you build this is through your authority. And a couple of different ways for building your authority, and I've mentioned this in the past, but I'm going to re-mention it. Number one is POP. You want to get around people that are successful, right? You want to make sure that you're getting pictures with celebrities and I know many of you are because you're in Gold Circle, or you went on to Business Icon and you got a couple of pictures, but the proximity of power, being around successful people, getting pictures, the not everybody does that, and it's kind of like FOMO. Wow, they're doing it and I'm not, right? Articles definitely want to get published in articles, so you want to make sure that you take your my story, you build it out, whether you build it out personally or you get somebody professionally to do it. At Branded Retreat, we do this, by the way, just so you know. But whether you do it, let us help you or you do it yourself, doesn't really matter. What matters is you do it. Right. And once you build out your story, whether that's with help from an expert or whether that is you going on AI, on ChatGPT and building it out, giving them the skeleton and let them build it, you want to get it published, right? Because the moment you get it published in an article, online, offline, you literally are now an authority because you have something that's published, right? Because many people are not published. Certainly many businesses aren't published, right? Makes you unique and different. That's the same thing with an award, right? You want to get an award as well. But if you get an article published, the gem there is Now you're tapping their database, not your bit database, right? I think of Anna Marie, who was one of the first people that went through one of the first branded retreats 2.5 years ago, when I used to teach it with Ross and with Adam. And literally, she's in 93 publications or something like that. 30 covers, by the way, right? She was in MSN about 2 months ago. The circulation, online circulation, is 60 million views per month, right? Phone's ringing off the hook, so get published. And then, as Jay said, once you get that article published, you take a copy of it, you take a picture of it, you print it out, and then you send it to all the other magazines that are similar, right? You send it to everybody else, and because that's taking the asset and leveraging it. Certainly what I did, when I got published in Success Magazine, I took what's called a photostat then, right? Which was a nice rendering of it, and I put it in a press kit, sent it out to dozens of people, and I got published in other articles as well. Podcasts. Man, if you build your own podcast, first of all, you can invite great people that you can interview, which gives you that proximity of power again. But you can also get interviewed by other people, right? And if you get interviewed by other people, right, then you're tapping their database, not your database. And this is a form of that message that Jay said about partnership, finding somebody else's database, right? A book gives you instant authority. I suggest many people write a book. Actually, I don't suggest that. What I suggest is you publish a book, get somebody else to write it. Robert Kiyosaki didn't write his book. Tony Robbins didn't write his book, at least not the second ones. He did do Unlimited Power. But you want to get that book published. YouTube, get out there. Got to get out there with a 90-day plan, and of course, speaking and presenting gets you there fast. Be loud and proud, right? Now, you might take a look on the right-hand side here, right? It says these are all of the different associations in the UK. And if you're going to speak, right, go speak for some of the different associations. They have conferences every year. They have luncheons. They have dinners. They have all kinds of events on a regular networking events. Man, and literally you can go to A to Z, and there's 8,000 associations, 3,200 Chamber of Commerce. Get out there speaking and getting your message out there. Be loud and proud with respect to it, right? Proximity of power works, so make sure we're doing it, right? So get those articles published, setting up your business or whatever it might be, right? Get them published out there. Write that book or get that book published as a bare minimum, right? This is my Dare to Be Rich book on the right-hand side. Looks really cool. Does not exist, right? What I mean by that is I'm about 80% done with it, right? But it looks like it's real right now, and if I wanted to, I could put this on a funnel and sell it tomorrow, right? By the way, if you're going to do a book, you might as well. I would suggest that you self-publish your book initially, but certainly if you're going to self-publish, then you can take that book, send it off to Penguin and to Scholas and Wiley, sorry, and some of the others, the McGraw-Hill and some of those others. And if you want a list, I mean, certainly go on Google, you can go on ChatGPT and pull a list of publishers and their addresses. But if you don't want me to send you this kind of piece, I'm happy to at the end. YouTube. We want to build out our YouTube channel. I've talked about YouTube marketing. I actually talked about YouTube marketing here a little while ago, right? You want consistent postings. You want to build a community, specialized thumbnails, use them to sell, right? Education. Biggest search on YouTube is how to. So in your title, have how to learn how to trade, right? Partnership with somebody, find an amazing influencer there, partner with them. If you can't partner with them, stick your ads in front of them, right? And if you don't know how to do that, go to AdSense, right, which is the YouTube ad program, right, and learn how to do it. Demonstration of power. What that means is in YouTube, the statistics from the past said that 87% of the people that were trying to buy a product or service typically go to 87%, sorry, typically go to YouTube to find the product service, see a demonstration, see if it works, right? And this typically is a thing. CTA, always got to do a CTA and retargeting, right? We also want to make sure that when we're building out our brand, we're realizing that there are some things that can actually affect our brand negatively. And one of them is cheap cards, right? Cheap business cards, not a good logo, not a good image, but even worse than that, generic email accounts. Man, if you have Jim at Hotmail or Jim at Gmail or Jim at Yahoo.com, you are a Yahoo. That's not professional. So you want to own the domain name. You want to have an email that is associated with the domain name, even if there's not a website, right, or a landing page, because it looks more professional. Jim at jimfrancis.com looks professional.